It's been 1 month of using the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, and I have to say it has some very impressive features that will shock you. But before we dive into this exciting review, hi, I'm Olive, your host here at Versus, and I'd like to thank HideMe VPN for sponsoring this video. Firstly, let me remind you about our exciting upcoming giveaway. We will be giving away the S24 collection to 3 lucky winners, so you will have the chance to win either the Samsung Galaxy S24 base model, the Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus, or the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Make sure to click the link in the description or in the pinned comment down below to enter. Also, make sure to follow us on our WhatsApp channel, as that is where we will be announcing the winner. Now, let's get into it, starting with build and design. The S24 Ultra has finally given us a flatter and less rounded design, with matte side rails that are textured instead of glossy. I personally love this new satin finish as it hides fingerprints better, and overall it just looks pretty good. The phone also comes in several new colors such as violet, yellow, and gray. And what's really cool about the gray version is that it changes color as it catches the light. Pretty neat. The device is no longer made from aluminium, as Samsung has finally decided to go in the direction of titanium, which is stronger and better at conducting heat from the inside of the phone to the outside. Although titanium is naturally a heavier metal, it's also tougher, meaning you need less of it, therefore the weight of the phone has actually decreased slightly compared to its predecessor. Finally, we have screen borders that have been evened out along with a nice flat display. However, the corners remain sharp, which is not ideal, but I suppose it's the Galaxy signature design. Since the screen is slightly bigger, it's now more responsive, making inputs feel a bit more in real time. And of course, you've got your 120Hz refresh rate along with 2600 nits, which is pretty impressive, isn't it? The beautiful display has now been upgraded from Gorilla Glass Victus 2 to Gorilla Glass Armor for protection. This new glass claims it can reduce glare up to 75%. The design of the internal speaker has now changed up, which should give the sound more space and improve the clarity of the audio. The S24 Ultra has 12GB RAM, supports Wi-Fi 7, and is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip. Moreover, it's run by One UI 6.1 based on Android 14. You have a very aesthetically pleasing display, and the drop-down menu looks much more organized than on previous versions. There's also a new always-on display and dynamic widgets. Just check out this cool animation on my weather app. Let's pause for a moment so that I can quickly introduce you to HideMe VPN. If you're someone who tends to find themselves needing to use local Wi-Fi regularly, but you don't feel 100% secure about it, then you'll want to hear about this. HideMe VPN is one of the fastest offshore VPNs with 24/7 support and cross-platform access. Enjoy 10GB speeds across 2,300 servers globally. You can also navigate the web with a trusted ally, SmartGuard, proactively guarding against malware, tracking, ads, and phishing threats in real time. Plus, they don't store logs, ensuring your actions remain yours. Best part, you can start for free. Click the link in the description to secure your online freedom with HideMe VPN. Simple, secure, and yours. Time to talk about the cameras, as let's be honest, we all want to know what improvements have been made to the S24 Ultra. The main camera can go up to 200 megapixels, which isn't anything new. However, the time to capture is now down to 238 milliseconds, which is very fast. Let's take a look at some examples of standard wide photos. Okay, whoa, we all know that Samsung is generally known for its overly saturated images, but would you take a look at that? We finally have some actual color accuracy. The exposure, however, is not at its best, as the S23 is better lit. But one thing I did notice, which I find quite odd, is that the S23 looks like the image has been slightly stretched out. You can notice it especially if you look at my head and my body, plus the church behind me. If you crop in a little also, you can see that the S24 has the sharper image. In the next photo, the color difference is wild. The S24 clearly has the more natural look, and you can see that the exposure is maintained at an accurate level, whereas the S23 overexposes the background. In night photos, the S23 has the higher exposure, but the S24 has the more accurate coloring, deeper contrast, and overall captures more details. In ultra-wide photos, I have pretty much the same remarks regarding saturation and exposure. This seems to be the biggest difference between the two devices. I'd say the amount of distortion is pretty similar in both images. In the next photo, both phones deliver almost identical results, apart from a few tiny differences, such as the S23 as always saturating the image a little too much, specifically in my face here, and the contrast is higher than on the S24. Finally, during low light outdoors, both devices perform fine, with the S24 having the more natural coloring, whereas the S23 is leaning towards a more warmer hue. I'd also say that the S24 is sharper and provides more detail. Moving on to portrait photos, I see almost no difference, apart from the few things I have already mentioned, such as saturation, exposure, and slight stretching of the image on the S23. I have to say the S24 looks very natural. When it comes to edge detection, I'd say both phones perform almost identical. They both do a decent job. One thing I did notice though on the S24 is that the lettering on the building beside me didn't blur, and it makes it really stand out. However, the camera angle on the S23 is slightly different and the lettering isn't visible at all, so this does make it challenging to make a complete fair comparison. Lastly, here's how portrait mode is looking outdoors at night. Considering how dark it was in reality, these aren't too shabby. My personal preference leans into the S23 as I look less washed out and the contrast is nice and high. The S24 also does a pretty great job, but it's definitely on the more exposed side, which of course some of you may prefer. I'd say both devices have very good edge detection as both images are looking seamless. The S23 has a slightly smoother and less harsh finish, which I personally prefer. Now let's move on to video and see if the S24 has any major differences. Both the front and rear cameras now have an improved noise reduction algorithm, which is very useful especially for nighttime videos, so let's see if that's accurate. So from what I'm seeing, the S23 has a deeper contrast, which does help to maintain details in the video. The S24 on the other hand has lower contrast and the shadows have been lifted, which isn't ideal as the footage can tend to look slightly washed out, but in the end it all comes down to personal preference. So here we have a nighttime video, and I have to say that although the S24 does a pretty good job with its noise reduction, I'd be lying if I say it does better than the S23. In my opinion, the S23 has the deeper contrast and least noise specifically noticeable in the sky. One thing both devices fail to do though is focus on the subject, in this case myself. I'm blurry the entire time, which isn't ideal. Perhaps if I had stepped a little bit closer, it could have fixed itself onto me, but nevertheless, it has failed to focus on me. In ultra-wide video, I'm really struggling to find any major differences between the devices. They seem almost identical to me, apart from the S23 having a slightly higher contrast, but apart from that, both videos look pretty good. During the night though, both videos appear blurry, with the S24 exhibiting significantly more noticeable noise. While neither shot is ideal, the S23's contrast is slightly excessive, whereas the S24's warmer overall hue and exposure look better. However, the excessive noise and blur in the S24's video unfortunately detract from its quality. Moving on to the front camera, we'll take a look at a few selfies first. In this first one, I'd say both devices do a relatively good job as both images are completely usable. They're sharp with good color accuracy and exposure. If we're being really picky, the S24 looks like it's been slightly stretched, but nothing that looks unusual or distorted. In this next photo outside, I'd say I have exactly the same remarks. Apart from the S23 being a bit more exposed, both photos look almost identical. Selfies in low light are always a hit or miss. Unfortunately, this time around, the S24 seems to be struggling a little with keeping the image sharp. But apart from that, I'd say both devices deliver almost identical results. When it comes to front camera video, both the S23 and S24 have pretty decent video quality. The S23 has better exposure as the S24 looks a little dim. It also seems to produce a bit of a purplish hue, which I've noticed it does quite a lot. The S23 has a warmer tone, which I personally prefer.
So here we have our Galaxy S23 Ultra. This is what the built-in microphone sounds like in a very sustained and calm environment. And then moving on to our new Galaxy S24 Ultra, this is what the built-in microphone sounds like on here. Is there a difference? I'm excited to see.
Audio is interesting to analyze. The S23 seems to have more muted audio with better noise cancellation abilities, whereas although the S24 has very crisp and direct sound, its noise cancellation isn't ideal. Therefore, it's up to the individual what you prefer. As we know, Samsung decided to remove the 10x telephoto lens, but we do have a 3x and a 5x telephoto lens on the S24 Ultra. But let's see how the zoom performs compared to the S23 Ultra. Here's the famous TV tower in Berlin, and at 3x zoom, I'd say both devices perform well with only slight color variations. At 5x zoom, the S24 starts to produce some noise, specifically in the sky, and the image isn't looking as sharp anymore, which is odd because it should be performing better with its 5x telephoto zoom. Naturally, with its 10x telephoto zoom, the S23 performs better here. It looks quite sharp and has a nice deep contrast, which helps to bring out details. At 30x zoom, the S24 does a good job at reducing the noise, but the S23 does the better job at preserving the details of the tower. Finally, at 100x zoom, neither appears particularly impressive, but they both provide enough detail for you to be able to at least recognize what you're looking at, with the S23 performing slightly better in this regard. The biggest change and upgrade from the S23 model is all of the AI capabilities that have been added to the device. So let's take a closer look at some of them. Firstly, not only can you shoot up to 120 FPS in 4K to get the best slow-mo, you can now also get instant slow-mo on any clip regardless of which frame rate it was shot in. All you need to do is hold down the video and ta-da! The playback speed is halved while keeping the video smooth. This feature also works on videos already shot in 120 FPS, and as you hold down the video, the frame rate will actually convert to 240 FPS. It's not perfect, but nevertheless, having the ability to do such a thing on a mobile device is pretty impressive. Next, we have AI image editing, where you have instant effects such as adding background blur to any image or moving objects around in photos you have already taken. You also have the ability to erase any distractions, such as people in the background, for example. Expanding objects in your image is also a possibility. These are cool features, but let's get onto the really juicy stuff, such as live translation. What this feature does is it allows you to get real-time translation during a call. You're able to choose which language you'd like to hear the call in and which language you'd like to be spoken into. You have up to 13 different languages to choose from, but I'm sure this will expand in the near future. I personally think this is wild and a very unique feature that could be useful for a lot of individuals. Moving on to voice transcription, which is found within the voice recording app. Whilst you're recording a voice message, the AI analyzes every person that's speaking and transcribes everything they're saying. You are then also able to translate the transcription to a different language. You're also able to summarize the entire voice note, which is pretty cool, especially for those who are big on taking notes via voice recordings. Speaking of summarizing voice recordings into notes, you can now automatically organize your notes into headings and bullet points for a clean and straightforward look. My notes always look like a huge mess, as it's a place, where I do my brain dumping, so this has definitely come in handy for me. You also have the ability to summarize them, instantly correct any spelling mistakes, or even translate them into a completely different language. Pretty neat, if I may say so myself. Circle to search is a pretty awesome feature. Basically, you can Google search objects by tapping and holding down the home button and drawing a circle around anything on your screen. It will take you directly to the item, or at least something very similar online. Finally, I want to talk about Smart Keyboard, aka Chat Assist. When you've typed out a message, you'll notice that there's now an AI icon, and once you tap it, 3 options will show up. You have chat translation, writing style, and spelling and grammar. Chat translation, as the name suggests, can instantly translate your message into many different languages. Writing style will show you several different options of ways you could rewrite your message. And spelling and grammar will quickly check your message to make sure that everything sounds okay before sending it. I have to be honest, all of these features are super impressive to have handy on the go wherever you are. So for all of you geeks who are dying to know how the performance is on each device, well, you're in luck because we did some benchmark tests and here are the results. Firstly, on Geekbench 6, the S24 scored higher on both single-core and multi-core. Next, we tried out 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, and again, it outperformed the S23, scoring 4,340. Finally, we tried out Antutu, and unsurprisingly, the S24 scored higher than the S23 once again. Finally, let's talk about battery life and pricing, as that's always crucial when considering if you really need that upgrade. So the S24 Ultra has the same 5000 mAh battery as the S23 Ultra, so nothing has changed here. However, the battery life has improved, and if you'd like to see a full-on battery drain test between the S23 and the S24, then you can watch TechNick's video, which we will link in the description down below. He does a very thorough test of both devices against some other competitors, and the results are really quite fascinating. At the time of this recording, the S23 Ultra is priced at just under $1,130 for the version with the highest amount of storage capacity, and the S24 Ultra is priced at just under $1,420, again for the 512GB version. So that pretty much sums up the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and its differences when compared to the S23 Ultra. What are your thoughts though? Would you consider purchasing the S24, or do you think that the S23 is already good enough? Let us know in the comments down below. In my personal opinion, the S24 has some major upgrades, especially when it comes to its AI capabilities, so if that's something that interests you, then upgrading does make sense. However, while the camera quality appears to have been enhanced, resulting in definitely a more natural look, particularly in terms of color accuracy, I would still argue that the S23 boasts a fairly decent camera. Ultimately, it all boils down to individual preferences. Don't forget to enter the giveaway for a chance to win something from the S24 series. If you're interested in any of these devices, you can find direct links to them in the description below. As always, give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to be a part of our Versus community if you aren't already. With that being said, we will see you in the next video, and until then, take care.